I want to take this opportunity to welcome the family, the friends, the colleagues, all of those who've been, many of those who've been impacted by the life and contributions of Dr. Roland Weinsier here for this afternoon's formal dedication of his portrait here in the Department of Nutrition Sciences and here in the Webb building, and to both dedicate that and to honor the legacy that he has established for this department and for this school, and frankly, the whole area of clinical nutrition in the practice of medicine. Dr. Weinsier has a very wonderful history with our school. After his education in medical education in Florida and then in Virginia, and then getting public health in the area of degrees in the area of nutrition at Harvard. After some time in Texas, I know he ended up coming to this school as the director of the Division of Clinical Nutrition. And he made incredible contributions there in improving the quality of life of individuals in our hospital and in our healthcare setting, and also in making tremendous research contributions. And I believe it was 1988, Roland became the chair of the Department of Nutrition Sciences, following along in the footsteps of Dr. Butterworth, who was a major contributor and kind of the lead in the creation of this particular department within this school. And under his leadership over the next 11 to 12 years, Roland made incredible contributions in moving the department forward to where it was ranked second in the country in terms of research funding in nutrition, second in the country in terms of viewed as the best graduate programs in the country. He just did an incredible job there. And he brought new insights to how we approach issues and questions in clinical nutrition, and particularly became interested in the area of obesity and how that impacts human health and how that impacts quality of life. He stepped down from the chair in 1999, 2000, that period, in order to pursue directing the new Center for Nutrition Research. And it was his baby. He created it. He got it funded by NIH, and the results of that center, the results of the contributions he made, the results of the Eat Right program, which came from his research, which continues today and very active and is very healthy here on this campus. All of those things have continued on and have continued to grow because of the seeds that he planted. One of those seeds, who I'm going to let talk with you a little bit, is David Allison. Dr. Allison came to us in, what year did you come, David? 2000. I knew it was right before I came. And David came as a faculty member in the School of Public Health, but he came here in many regards to be the associate director of the center. I mean, that was what really attracted him and brought him here. And he had a very close working relationship with Roland over the next couple of years as he moved into his role there. And that work has continued and continued to grow under David's leadership. And so what I wanted to do is to turn this over at this point to David, to let him share some of his own thoughts at this particular point in time. But I just would want to close by saying, before I turn it over to David, is I can't think of anything more fitting than for Roland's picture to sit next to Dr. Butterworth's, because the two of them together are the ones who have made the incredible imprint and made this the national and international program that it is today, and has influenced so many lives in this room. So I'm going to turn it over to David. David?
Thank you. Well, it is a privilege and an honor to be here with you today on this particular august occasion to honor my dear friend and colleague, Roland Weinsier. I do have a few words that I'd like to say, but the very first words I'd like to say is that I'd like to give some of my time and some of my words to another friend, David Weinsier, who also, Roland's son, who wants to say a few words, and I'll come back after that.
All right, so I think what we're going to do is I'm going to have a few introductory words, and then what I'd like to do is unveil the portrait, and then I'd like to continue with a few more thoughts about Roland, and then pass it back to you, Dr. Allison, to finish things up, if that's okay. So first things first, I would like to thank everyone here for taking time out of your busy lives and celebrating this event we have today. It's certainly heartwarming to know that Roland's memory remains, and this portrait that you'll see momentarily will be a lasting memory here in one of the places that he cared most about. So in addition, I'd also like to thank those individuals who helped, particularly in making this portrait a reality, whether financially or non-financially. Major contributors include Dr. Doug Heimberger. Doug, could you raise your hand? Longtime friend and colleague of Roland. Dr. Adrian Heine, colleague who's in Switzerland. Family friend Jeff Stern. Dr. Michael Brooks. Dr. Allison and Dr. Carvey. And Dean Jones as well for your contributions. In particular, Katie Davidson. Katie, are you here today? Are you in the room? Wave, please. Who helped for all of her work in help coordinating this event, the hanging of the portrait, and countless other tasks that I was not able to take care of with my being at a distance from Atlanta. Larry Bishop, the author and creator of the portrait you're about to see. When Larry first presented this to Charlotte and I in our family room not too long ago for our final approval, it felt like Roland was in the room with us. So I think you're going to be pleased when you see it momentarily. And lastly, before we unveil the portrait, I would like to take a moment to talk about what inspired it, kind of an interesting little story. So I mentioned Dr. Adrian Heine a moment ago, who's not here in the room. He and his family live in Switzerland. So he worked for Roland on a sabbatical many years ago, and he lived with us actually for a time when we were growing up in Birmingham while he was getting settled. Not uncommon for Roland to invite some of his new colleagues, particularly from afar, to stay with us before they made their own connections in town. So 2 or 3 years ago, Dr. Heine, now with his kids grown up and probably been 15 years since he was in Birmingham, he came over and visited the States. And so when he actually had a chance to spend a couple of days in Atlanta and asked if he could stay with Charla and I. And so on one of the days he was in Atlanta, in addition to seeing the sights, he drove over to Birmingham so he could show his now grown kids the place where he used to work. And so when he returned, I asked him about the trip, whether he enjoyed seeing UAB again, any fond memories. And he said, one thing he said, almost in passing, really resonated with me. What he said is there was no visible sign at all or any indication that Roland had ever worked here at UAB. And my initial reaction to that was one of mere acceptance. It wasn't all that surprising, really. It had been roughly 10 years since Roland had worked here, and it's not like he was Gene Bartow or anything, right? So he was just the head of the nutrition building. He didn't put his name on the basketball stadium over there. But then having it weigh on my conscience for a little while, I decided to do something about it. And so I drove over one day when I was seeing a client, and Dr. Allison and I sat down and we brainstormed a little bit, and he connected me with Dean Jones and others. And the ball started rolling, got introduced to Larry, and that culminated in the portrait that you will see today. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to, Steve, would you mind helping me unveil the portrait, and then give you something else to look at besides me, and then I'll talk a little further about Roland. Now, Roland passed away in 2002, which feels like yesterday to a few of us in the room, but at the same time, I recognize that for most of you, that was quite some time ago. And since many of you have never met Roland or have only a distant memory of him, I'm going to try to give you just a bit more insight about him that can't be gleaned from the portrait you see here. He was born in Jacksonville, Florida, and raised in Orlando. His father was a naturopath and ran what I suppose could be called something of an active retirement community in Orlando, 1950s style. Here, Roland earned his medical degree from the University of Florida, completed his internship and residency at the University of Virginia, received his nutrition training at Harvard, where he earned a master's degree and doctoral degree in public health. And then after his medical training in Boston, where I was born, he served his country as a major in the Air Force in San Antonio, where my brother Steve was born. And then in 1975, he picked up the family, and we all moved to Birmingham, where my sister Nancy was born, and joined UAB as an assistant professor of Medicine and Nutrition. In 1977, he became director of the Division of Clinical Nutrition in the newly formed Department of Nutrition Sciences, and for 11 years he served as the chairman of that department, succeeding the late Dr. Butterworth, who's that gentleman right there. Roland became director of UAB's Clinical Nutrition Research Center in 1999, and under his leadership, the Department of Nutrition Sciences here at UAB grew exponentially, and at the time of his passing was rated second in the nation in a U.S. News and World Report poll. Now, outside of work, Roland was an avid gardener, photographer, and an accomplished pianist as well. He was a particularly generous person. I mentioned previously that he would often invite UAB medical graduate assistants or physicians doing sabbaticals in Birmingham to stay at our home for weeks or sometimes even months or longer, so they were not on their own in a new city. He had minimal interest in money or material possessions. He chopped his own firewood from trees in the backyard. He laid his own brick walkway, brick by brick, and he built the kids a swing set and our dog a house, all by hand. He enjoyed fixing things and felt like he could fix just about anything. I recall when our 25-year clothes dryer finally broke down, Mom got pretty excited that she was finally going to get a new dryer after all those years, but alas, Roland and I carried that dryer down to the garage, completely dismantled it, removed the heating element, and called every mom and pop store in town looking for that replacement part. He finally found the part, we popped it in, and to my mother's great dismay, it worked like a charm. The dryer sounded like a tornado for the next 10 years or so, but it certainly worked just fine. Roland had been a strict vegetarian since roughly the age of 10. I recall he told us once that he had a hot dog around that age and decided that was it. I don't know if it was one particular bad incident or maybe something built upon itself, but he had been a vegetarian pretty much his entire life. He was also the kindest, most generous, unassuming, and patient person I'd ever met and could handle stressful situations with ease. I often think about what he would be doing if he was still with us. He'd be about 70 today. One thing I'm pretty sure of is he'd be driving a white Honda Accord because he had driven 3 of those in a row over a span of about 25 years. So I have no reason to believe that he'd be driving anything else today. He never wanted to completely retire. He said he wanted to buy a large piece of property outside of Birmingham, not too far away from the school, such that he could still come back to UAB and contribute on a regular basis, but far enough away such that he'd have a place to put, no doubt would be an enormous garden and yard for him to continue his hobbies. When I was young, one of my friends, I recall, commented that the front of our yard at our house here in Birmingham looked like it belonged to the Addams family. It had all sorts of growing weeds and fun things that were unrecognizable. So you can only imagine what that garden might be today. I'm sure he'd be growing various fruits and vegetables. In fact, when we were kids, every once in a while something would sprout up such that we didn't know what it was. It was some type of eggplant, squash, cantaloupe mutation. So when we saw something like that, of course, one of these mystery vegetables he had grown, of course, the kids would all run away from it. But what Roland would do is pick it out very proudly, wave it around, take a picture with it, of course, and then go cook it, trying his might to decipher exactly what the heck it was. Now, as time has passed, certain things always make me think of him. One occasion is anytime I'm making a smoothie. The guy simply loved making smoothies. And so recently I treated myself to one of those high-end Vitamix blenders. I don't know if any of you have one of these things, but if you're not, it seems that blending technology has really exploded in the last several years. This is one of those blenders where you can throw a brick into it and it'll just pulverize it in about 30 seconds. And so just about any time I'm making a smoothie, I think of him and wonder if he'd approve of it. Probably not, because the ingredients that went into his smoothies included things like postum powder and all sorts of grains and minerals and nutrients that I never heard of. And I remember that postum in particular. He tried to pass it off to us kids as chocolate, and we weren't buying any of that. He loved Alabama football and would have enjoyed watching their recent success. And he didn't mind Auburn too much either. He was a big UAB basketball fan, in fact, a season ticket holder from the very first season in 1978. I, in fact, was a ball boy for several years during that period when I was a kid, and we would always go to games together, so that brings back fond memories. I recall when UAB made a run to the Final Eight a few years back in the Mike Anderson era, after my father had passed away, beating #1 seed Kentucky along the way. And I remember thinking that he would have really enjoyed that, and we would have enjoyed watching those games together. And of course, anytime I see or read about a new diet or obesity epidemic, whether it be on the news or on the TV, I'm sure he would be at the forefront of such subjects, and he'd probably be quoted in newspapers or on TV giving interviews or the like. But most often I think of him at kids' events, whether it be my daughter's dance recitals or son's baseball games. And as time passes, before we know it, it'll be bar and bat mitzvahs, and it'll be graduations, and then ultimately it will be weddings. And why we miss him most on those occasions is that we know he would be there, camera in hand, and that he would be proud. So sadly, he did miss 6 of his 7 grandkids being born, who only know him by pictures and the stories we tell of him. But we make sure to instill those same lessons and principles he taught us in our own children. Dr. Allison, with that, I will pass it over to you.
Thank you, David. That was terrific. So I was struck by this thought of the Bartow Arena as David was speaking, and I thought, well, it might be interesting if there were a building that was called the Weinsier building, and that might last. But in fact, towers of steel and glass don't last. They'll all be dust eventually, and nothing lasts except the ideas and the love that we pass on to others, and they in turn pass on to others still. And I think we see that in Roland here. We're all, many of us, scientists here. And as scientists, we like to look at what's observable in behavior. Words are okay, behavior is better. I could tell you some words about Roland as a scientist, as a campus leader, as a mentor. I could read you from his CV and tell you how many 100 publications he had, how many millions of dollars of grants he had, how many students he had. Words. This is deeds. The very fact that you are here is the most powerful thing that I can point out about his legacy. The fact that Nancy Bell, who's been retired for several years now, took the time to come in. I don't think she just came for the free fruits and vegetables, although maybe a little bit, but she took the time to come in. The fact that others from across campus walked over here, took the time out of their schedules. The fact that his family flew in. The fact that Doug and Beth Heimberger came in from out of state and flew in for this event. Those are deeds, not words, and those deeds tell you how people felt about Roland. It tells you that he's still here. It tells you that his presence is still being felt. It doesn't need to be a building. It's in the people, and it's only in the people that it will endure and it will be passed on. When I came to UAB, it was in large part because I wanted to work with Roland and others here. Roland asked me at one point when I was considering it, he said, "So you really want to come live in Alabama?" And I said, "Well, hell no. I don't want to come live in Alabama, but I'm willing to come live in Alabama, in part for the opportunity to work with you." Turns out now I love living in Alabama, but I really came down in part to work with Roland and others. And one of the things was that I could tell that here at UAB, under Roland's leadership, there was a sense of family. There were other obesity and nutrition centers I could have gone to, but I liked this one because there was a sense of family. I knew Roland, I knew Tim Nagy, I knew Barbara Gower, I knew Gary Hunter, I knew a few others. And they were really a center. They worked together. They weren't just scattered individuals who wrote their names down on the same piece of paper. And Roland was the glue that held people together. When I was thinking about coming down, I knew Roland had been stepping down, was in the process of stepping down his chair. And I said to him, "Why are you stepping down?" I was worried maybe he was thinking about leaving and then I might not have come here. And he said, "Oh, no, I'm not thinking about leaving." He said, "I'm stepping down because I'm not really cut out to be a chair." I thought this was a rather odd statement, since by any accounting, he was a very successful chair and had been a very successful chair for over a decade. "What do you mean you're not cut out to be a chair?" I said. He said, "Well, you know, when you're the department chair, someone is always angry at you. Somebody's office isn't big enough, somebody's salary isn't big enough, somebody's lab isn't big enough, somebody's salary isn't as big as the guy next door, and so on and so on. It's always someone mad at you." And he said, "You know, it really gets to me. I take it home with me. I think about it. I think about these people. I want them to be happy and successful and all." And I think that's an extraordinary remark. I think to be able to really take that on, to really care about those people, shows why it was difficult for Roland to be a chair, but it also shows why he was so successful, because he really did care. And he cared about everybody that came and made us feel welcome. When I came here, he drove me around, and then he immediately took me to his house and introduced me to his family. And so I have great pleasure in seeing the family here today. And they sort of adopted me a little bit in those early days. And that made us feel tremendously welcome. I think many people, particularly come from a new place in the world. This is a very foreign place to come to at first. And it's good to feel welcome. And Roland really helped us feel welcome. And as I say, what lasts is what's passed down. And so Roland, you can see his lasting impact today, that more than 10 years after his passing, that you are still here, that we are still motivated enough to have this event, to construct this portrait. That suggests his enduring and lasting impact. That Doug Heimberger, it meant enough to him to go to the American Society of Nutrition and say, you know this mentoring award? I want you to name it after Roland. I want you to change the name of it. And the entire American Society of Nutrition said, yes, we will do that. And it is now the Roland Weinsier Award, and it will be given just next week when Doug Heimberger will fly to San Diego and give it to a very deserving scholar in Roland Weinsier's name. And it's here in all of us as we pass that down. So I sometimes now recruit faculty and young postdoctoral fellows and all, and I'm often, given the schedules we all keep, feeling a little stressed and busy. And that first day that the new faculty member or the new postdoc arrives, my temptation is to say, welcome to Alabama. Take yourself out to dinner, have a good time, send me a receipt if you want. I'm a little busy right now. But I don't do that because I learned better from Roland. I learned a lot of things from Roland, and so I take them to my house, and they meet my family, and they meet my kids, and they become part of our extended family, and it's passed on. And Jose, who was my fellow, has now taken that, and he does it. And it goes on, and that's what endures. It is only the ideas, it is only the love that endures, and the fact that you are all here suggests that it is indeed enduring, and Roland is still here with us. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for joining us. Have some food, shake some hands, have a hug, have a cry. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you.